Magazine.
Tonight, a bad note in the music business.
He had a really good track record, what seemed like a good track record to a young band like us.
In the crowds of the marketplace,
They wanted a shot at success.
I wasn't going into this looking for a big deal.
But they listened to their hearts and not their heads.
Yeah, it was like someone holding a pot of gold in front of you.
A full edition documentary, Selling the Dream.
The Magazine with Wendy Mesley.
Good evening. Brian Stewart is away this week. So you want to be a rock and roll star? For thousands of musicians, it's the dream of making it that keeps them singing and strumming. You're about to meet some of those wannabes, young faces, fresh sounds. They caught the interest of a Canadian record label, and with visions of hits in their heads, they signed on the dotted line. But instead of fame and fortune, these musicians found something else. It's the subject of an investigation by the magazine. Here's Clifton Joseph with Selling the Dream.
This is how you measure success in the Canadian music industry, one CD at a time. And judging by the numbers and the awards, it's alive and well. Spinning into the mainstream of silver, gold, and quadruple platinum sales are the stars from Canada: Celine Dion, Alanis Morissette, Shania Twain, Bryan Adams, Sarah McLachlan, and all the others. But no guarantees on the fast track to fame and fandom, and countless will miss this groove train to musical stardom. Enter Mark Berry, an American record producer who came to Toronto 7 years ago after stints in Australia and the United States. His vision? Plug into the underground street-level Canadian rock music scene with his independent Attack Records and sign new, emerging talent that the major record labels would overlook. Here at a recent launch of a new teen magazine at Toronto's Roxy Blue nightclub, the entertainment for the evening is one of his latest acquisitions, a Calgary band with the rather apt name Hope Springs Eternal.
we have gathered here to worship.
As far removed from the rock and roll world of Mark Berry as you can get, the main gig of Christian singer Lisa Waits is the Full Gospel Tabernacle Church in Leamington, Ontario.
We're united.
In spite of this, back in 1997, Mark Berry heard of her and pitched a record deal.
We will raise.
I wasn't going into this looking for a big deal. I was looking to share my faith, to share my beliefs, and we've thought that Mark was sort of a good producer who had a proven track record who could help us do that.
So what was the deal he actually offered you then?
It was a joint venture contract. So the idea was that he would put up 50% of the funds, and then I or my investors would put up the other 50% of the funds, and that he would be the producer, that there would be recording and mixing and sort of this 5-star industry standard production, and that at the conclusion of that, he was going to do all these things with Christian radio and he says hopefully video airplay and all this sort of stuff that was supposed to be able to get my message of faith out to other people.
Lisa handed over $17,500 of her father's inheritance money as her half of the deal, but says she got very little of what Berry promised, from musicians and backup vocals to promotion and contacts, and over a year later had to leave on an Asian tour without her finished CDs.
It was just utter frustration. You get to a point where you just start to think, oh, this guy's really not going to do. This guy's not going to do what he said he was going to do. So we felt very betrayed.
And she was not alone. It's a Sunday morning in a remote industrial area in Mississauga. The band Maybrick is doing what they like best, blasting their music, rehearsing for an upcoming gig.
He lured us with sort of grandiose promises Well, first he had a really good track record, what seemed like a good track record to a young band like us. He said, this is what we're going to do, this is the type of advertising, this is the type of marketing that'll be involved, this is the amount of money that I'm going to invest. And it sounded so good, you know? It was really hard to resist.
Mark Berry saw them perform at a club in Toronto like this one. They signed their joint venture deal when one of the appearances advanced them their share, $20,000.
It was sort of like you put in half, we put in half. But we have records of us putting in our $20,000, but we have no record of him ever depositing any money in the bank.
It wasn't just kids looking for their first record deal that fell to Berry's charms. Sean Kilbride, a musician since high school in the Maritimes, was the drummer for the gold-selling band Haywire in the late 80s. Berry was the producer for hire on one of their albums. When Sean set up his new band Snapdragons a few years ago, Berry's joint venture deal struck the right chord.
At first, we were looking for the normal record deal, but we looked at it and we thought this, we could come out actually better than a lot of bands if he does what he says he's going to do. We could actually make more money on every unit sold. If I knew it was going to turn out like this, not in a million years, I just could have done it myself.
Greenwich Village, Manhattan. It's a regular Thursday band night at the Elbow Room, and the band, As It Is, pumps up the decibels. Lead singer Chris Wall created the band's website, and that's how Mark Berry found him. The rest of their story follows the same script of courtship, deals, and tales of woe. Only the price changed. For As It Is, it came to $25,000 US.
He says that he sells the dream. That's how they do it. He sells the dream, which, every band, when they get, the initial interaction with the record company, becomes very excited,
We're going to Canada, we're doing an album, this is great, da-da-da. We were starstruck, we were conned.
When, just on the mildest bit of research, the people you talk to are either extremely angry or hurt, you know something's not right.
Between 20 and 30 bands signed joint venture deals with Mark Berry at $15,000 to $30,000 each. None of the bands knew each other when they took the Yellow Brick Road to Toronto from New Zealand, Australia, Brazil, the United States, Europe, and across Canada. The bands we spoke to knew there was no guarantee of success, but they didn't expect the same nightmare. In his biomaterial, Mark Berry lists his extensive producer and label credits. It's a who's who of rock and roll. Paul McCartney, David Bowie, Duran Duran, Carly Simon, I Mother Earth, the list goes on. And on his website, markberry.com, are his claims of generating $150 million in sales from records he's produced or claims he's worked on. But it's these joint venture contracts that have caused most of the outrage from the bands, and why we spoke with Mark Berry recently at his Attack office in Toronto.
How does that work? I mean, okay, so I'm a joint venture agreement with you. I come up with my half of the money. I give it to Attack Records. And then what, you put your 50% in a separate bank account or the same bank account?
Correct, separate bank account, and then it's administered through the label.
If you had to prove that you actually put these monies in, how would you do that?
Well, there's verification of investment on every deal, and that's supplied to every investor that is invested in their projects.
I've actually gone through some of the joint venture agreements, which seem like basically 50-50 partnerships. And it specifically states that there will be no financial accounting from you to the artist. What would be wrong with an equal partner being told where the actual money was spent?
With regards to the production expenses, it's industry norm not to provide those expenses because the amount that's laid out is the overall amount. All those contracts have been approved by an attorney. 90% of those contracts have been approved by a lawyer and or attorney that represents the bands.
While it's true most of the bands had their joint venture deal looked at, many of their lawyers were not entertainment specialists. So we took the contracts to Susan Abramovich, partner in the firm of Stone Henderson and one of Canada's leading entertainment lawyers. She says the joint venture deal is just one of 3 bad deals these bands signed with Attack.
The upshot of the 3 pieces is that the artist is investing in their own recording, but giving up ownership to the record label without any advances being paid. And in addition, it goes even further and has the artist giving up ownership, or a piece of the ownership of the music publishing rights in that artist's songwriting. And then you add on top of that, that the artist is actually investing the money to produce their own recording, and you have of the most unfavorable deals that I have seen in the industry today.
It looks to me as if that these bands are putting up the 50% of the budget,
and they're owning 50% of the record,
and they have no actual indication that you've put in your 50%.
That's not true. There is verification of investment, and I've stated this earlier.
Sean Kilbride paid $17,500, and his Snapdragons album was eventually released. But he and all the bands we spoke with believe that their money not only paid for all the recording costs, but provided a profit for Berry as well.
Whenever I ask to see the books on our joint venture, his standard answer, and here it is, I quote, "I don't have to prove anything. You do. There is an audit provision in your contract. Use it." That's where I stand. I have to audit the guy to find out exactly where the money's going. Even show me a receipt, which still could be false, but show me something. I don't have to. Sue me from day one.
In the case of Lisa Waits, Berry signed her to an Attack Records contract. To resolve the mix of the sacred and the profane, Berry had her design her own label for her CD, Dry and Thirsty Land, which she took 1.5 years to produce, complete with a typo. No extra charge.
What we did for Lisa, okay, we provided her with album artwork, finished masters, finished product, which we shipped her, which was not ready for her trip to Korea. No, it wasn't. I wish it had been, but unfortunately we're dealing with a third-party manufacturer, and I can't control that.
She also said that the studio time was budgeted by you for $20,000, yet she learned that most of that real cost she thought was $3,000, a difference of like $17,000.
Oh,
actual studio costs.
That's silly. That's absolutely silly.
So you spent $20,000 on studio for Lisa Waits'
I can't remember exactly what was spent on that particular record.
We've had no paperwork from them, no financial accounting of what was spent, say, on the studio time, or what was actually spent on the tapes or the musicians or anything like that. We have requested that information, and our lawyer has requested that information, and they haven't given any.
But some of the bands, like Sean Kilbride of Snapdragons, did get at least one receipt, $6,300 for studio costs, paid by Mark Berry. The budget he got from Berry, however, showed studio costs of $20,000. The receipts came from this man, Wayne Rowe, manager of Hit Zone, the studio where Snapdragons recorded.
Just let me explain one other thing to you with regards to this. Mr. Wayne Rowe, who was the former manager of that facility, was fired from that facility for embezzling money. It's certainly something that has never been received, nor has it been paid for through my company accounts.
Wow. That's scary.
Rowe denies any embezzlement and says he sent the receipts out a year before he left the studio.
Those invoices are true. I mean, you know, we were at the time of roughly anywhere between $300 and $400 a day. But then in turn, what he was doing was just, you know, quadrupling it in some cases. It was just a pattern with him. I mean, where
he overcharged all of the bands?
Yeah, you know, as far as I know, yeah.
The Toronto band Vertical Creep signed their contract with Mark Berry in 1996. They paid $25,000 for their share, and after recording at Hit Zone Studio, were frustrated and angry.
His game is basically money. Yeah, it doesn't matter. He's not looking for a good band or a bad band. He's looking for a group of individuals who have big dreams, and he shows them these big lights, and name drops all over the place.
Mark he's like a shark, you know, he smells the blood and he's right in there.
To try and get some answers about their contract, they went back to the studio to talk with their engineer and studio president, Peter Culbertson.
It's a mystery. I don't know how he figured he could get away with having a signed document.
Culbertson says the band showed him their contract, which to his surprise had his studio listed as sharing in the deal.
My name is here and my title is here, but that is definitely not my signature, and it is witnessed by Mark S. Berry.
The signature is not even close. When you make it in the music biz, sooner or later you make it to the Big Apple, New York City. According to Berry, all his bands made it to this company, headquartered at Madison and 55th. One of the ploys that Mark Berry and Attack Records use to entice bands to sign with the label is that the final master of their music will be done here by what Mark Berry claims is an award-winning Sony master engineer. But like so many other things with Attack Records, it might be more wishful thinking than reality. When we asked Sony, they told us that the engineer in question, Mr. Mark Wilder, knew nothing about Mark Berry or Attack Records. Wilder wouldn't return our calls, and Sony refused an interview, issuing first this statement claiming no relationship between Sony and Attack. But when we showed Sony this fax from Wilder saying Mark Berry was his client, Sony sent us a second statement saying that Wilder works for Sony and that Sony had done some ad hoc work for Attack. We also asked Sony about this claim on Mark Berry's website that he had just signed a distribution deal with Sony. In Attack's most recent advertising, trumpeting 10 new record releases, they say their distribution is by Sony through a small Canadian independent label called Sour, which has a deal with Sony. A week or so after our inquiries, Sony told Sour to drop their deal with Attack.
What kind of reasons did Sony give?
The interference from a third party.
What does that mean?
That means that the CBC has gotten involved in tortiously interfering with contractual agreements.
How? By asking questions?
You tell me how.
We did talk to Sony in New York, and they said Attack could not mention Sony as a distributor, that in Attack's dealings, that all they could say is Sour. Is that so?
No. I have a contract with Sour that states that I can absolutely mention Sony and use their logo.
Sony is saying no, though.
I have a contract.
While Mark Berry is demanding an apology from the CBC for asking questions about his company, he was denying any knowledge of this man's activities. Detective Stephen Bone of the Toronto Police is actively pursuing an investigation into Attack's contracts and practices.
A lot of bands, I think, would have felt in their own dealings that, you know, it's us. It happens to be these circumstances at the moment, and maybe dismissive of it. Well, if it keeps happening every time, I guess it wasn't just bad fortune.
When we return, the Australian counterattack.
This is the music industry after all. You know, there are no honest deals. There are only deals that you can improve on.